Alright guys, in this video I'm going to fix Switch Axe for Monster Hunter Wilds. Alright, there's a lot of problems with this weapon. I'm going to give easy solutions and possibly long-term solutions to fix this weapon. The fundamental problem with this weapon is it doesn't do enough DPS. You know, it's one thing to do enough damage, but it needs to be able to do that damage in a given amount of time. So you can see for most of its attacks, its current DPS is sitting at around 21. And then for buffed axe, and if you add file damage, that only goes up a little bit more to like about 24, maybe 26 for some combos. So for buffed axe, you get a 10% damage increase for all axe attacks, and that automatically increases your DPS by 10%. So for example, for the heavy slam combo, it goes from 24.2 to 26.6. That's about a 10% damage increase. That's fine. But the issue with that final result is that it needs to be about 30 to be on par with other weapons. So there's a couple ways you can do that. One way you can do that is you can just increase the motion values. Now, in my opinion, I feel like its base damage without buffs should be around 27 DPS. And then with a buffed axe, it should hit about 31 DPS. That's just my opinion, because you need to be rewarded in some way for maintaining a buff. If you need a buff just to be at the mediocre baseline compared to other weapons, that's not really a buff. That's kind of a gimp. So that's why I say 27 to 31 DPS. Another way you can buff the damage is you can keep the same moveset for Switch Axe. And this is a little bit controversial thing and would need a lot of testing, but one thing you could do is increase the attack speed of the weapon. So the benefit of doing this is you can keep the whole moveset for the weapon intact, but you just speed up the animation. So you could increase the attack speed by about 10%. That would give another 10% increase to DPS. The issue with doing it this way though is that it changes the feel of the weapon. So if it is the developer's intention for Switch Axe to be very slow, if you increase the attack speed, it's going to feel more like a speedier weapon, right? So this is really a question for the developers on whether you want it to feel like a slow weapon or a fast weapon. And honestly, I don't think they really know themselves, because the reason I say that is because a lot of their combos are multi-hit in that to do certain combo chains, it requires lots of hits. For example, the typical axe combo to get into spiral, which is the key move that you want to get into because it gives a lot of gauge, is always a 3-hit combo. You cannot 1-2 into a spiral. So like a 1 hit and the second hit be a spiral. That's another fix I would make for Switch Axe, to be quite honest. Spiral should not be locked behind 2 hits. It needs to be locked behind 1 hit. And you can see that right here with the time graph here. So if for all of these combos to get into spiral, it takes more than 4 seconds to complete a spiral combo. And that is not good. That's just bad design, because if you're trying to incentivize and you really need people to hit spirals, it needs to be land somewhere over here. It needs to be after 2 seconds, I would say, to hit a spiral, not more than 4 seconds. That just takes too much time, and the amount of opportunities to get off a spiral are not going to be that many. And it's so critical to hit as many spirals as possible, so you're always constantly building gauge. Now, you could make the argument that, okay, well, maybe there actually isn't that many opportunities to hit spiral, so you should only be hitting spiral very sparingly, and that when you do hit the spiral, then you know it's a big reward, right? You get a lot of gauge out of that. That's one argument you could make for that, but honestly, I don't think it makes the weapon that fun to play. I feel like if you hit more spirals, it makes the weapon more fun to play, and the way you're naturally going to allow players to hit more spirals is to make the spiral axe attack come after the first hit, so it's on the second hit. If this is the moveset and this is the time graph for the combos, it's just not going to be fun to fight against fast monsters. And another benefit of doing it this way, in my way, is it allows you to maintain the same weapon speed for the weapon. So earlier I proposed a 10% attack speed buff for Switch Axe. You wouldn't need to do that. You can just cancel out the second move and just go directly into spiral, and you can maintain the same weapon speed. So you still keep the same rhythm to the weapon. There's trade-offs to this thing. I don't particularly care. I play all the weapons. I play fast weapons. I play slow weapons. I really don't care how they want to do it. But right now, it's just not good. So going back a little bit. So the main thing is to get that DPS to at least 30. It shouldn't be that hard to play Switch Axe and maintain a 30 DPS for most combo attacks. So you can see here, when I add in all the extra damage additions you get to Switch Axe, whether it's through buffed axe or sword file damage, the DPS is still kind of crappy at 24 and 27. And to put this in perspective, dual blades without its dodging buff on its super attack, its super combo, can maintain a 51 DPS, which is insane. This is actually quite pathetic that Switch Axe can't even hit 30 DPS on its finisher moves when it's buffed compared to dual blades. So if you just want to do a lot of damage, just play dual blades. So for these large finishing attacks, these attacks here that take more than 6 seconds to do, the big heavy combos, the DPS needs to be at least 40. There's a big issue here. It has nothing to do with Switch Axe. Well, it has partially to do with Switch Axe. Okay, the issue is the idea of multiplayer. That's the whole thing that's making Switch Axe impossible to fix, because Switch Axe forgoes a lot of defensive capabilities, and supposedly you get more damage output out of it. But right now it doesn't have damage output out of it, and they're kind of stuck in a hard place because you can't buff the damage on Switch Axe right now. Because if you have 4 players jump into a multiplayer hunt with Switch Axe, and one person is going to maintain aggro on the monster, the other 3 people have free reign to do a lot of damage. So if they put this DPS up to like 40 and you have 3 players that do a lot of damage with Switch Axe, or even reach dual blades levels of damage like at 51%, it just makes Switch Axe too strong in a multiplayer setting. So I think that's partially why they kind of were very conservative with the DPS right now. This is actually more of a larger conversation on whether Monster Hunter should be a multiplayer game or a single player game. I personally only play it as a single player game. I very rarely play multiplayer. If I was playing single player, I would not play Switch Axe, just in terms of if I wanted to do a lot of damage. I mean, I'll play for fun just to, experience Switch Axe and play with the mechanics of the weapon. But in terms of weapon balance, the fundamental issue is because of multiplayer. If I had to fix it in a given situation for these large combos, so right here, this overwrite left combo and this double slash here, they're okay. Double slash needs to be a little bit higher in my opinion. It's 24. It's about 25 right now. It needs to be about 27, 30. Overwrite left is all right with file ticks, 30.6. Could be a little bit higher. I would say 31. But, the double heaven into unbridled and full Rita slash, these need to be much, much higher at about 40. It needs to be 40. The next thing I wanted to talk about is maintaining the buffs on the weapon. Right now, I think maintaining the buffs on the weapon are a bit too hard or too difficult. So the first thing you want to maintain is the buffed axe. So you do have that 10% damage buff for axe attacks. I think it needs to be a little bit longer if you're going to keep the same spiral axe combo. You can keep the same timer for the buffed axe if you put that spiral slash in the second hit of the combo. I think that just fixes everything, and then you don't have to mess with buff timers and how long you stay buff for. But if you don't do that, you need to increase the buff timer on the axe mode buff. One reason you have to do that is because half the time you're being in sword mode, you're really only getting half the value of that buff. You're not going to utilize that full time for that buff, because your uptime is going to be, ideally split half axe, half sword. Or even, at a higher level, you want to be in a sword mode more often. Actually, getting that buff is not that easy. You need to do the heavy slam combo, which here you can see it takes more than 4 seconds to do. So you can't just on command do that. The monster needs to give you a big opening for you to do heavy slam. The next is the file damage. Now, it'll be interesting to see how file damage scales with the full release of the game, because right now we're getting about 8.4 damage per file tick. It's a little too early to tell. It's a little too early to tell how much that damage will scale, and usually flat damage in early game is actually very strong. That's why you get more value out of Might Seed, Demon Powder, Demon Drug in early game, because those flat damage increases are a larger percentage of your total damage. And same goes for Charge Blade with its file tick damage. File tick damage in early game does a lot of damage, and the same should be true for Switch Axe with its file tick damage. But the issue is that its motion value is just so crappy for it's just standard attacks that its file tick damage doesn't do enough to compensate for that, combined with the slow Switch Axe attack speed. There's different ways you can go about fixing Switch Axe. The most brain dead way, and just flip a number, is just increase the motion values a little bit so that these all hit 30. Another way is to keep the motion values fixed, or maybe to increase them a little, but increase the weapon attack speed. But again, like I said earlier, you run into issues and you're starting to lose identity of the weapon, where if you're trying to maintain a slow identity to the weapon, then that could be an issue. Another alternative way you can do that is take out moves in the combo. So I think these are a bit outdated. 3-hit combos for axe mode, I think, in my personal opinion, are too outdated. Spiral needs to land on the second hit. I think this is actually the boldest, but I think it's actually the best change for the weapon, is to put that spiral slash on the second hit because you get a lot of gauge from it. It's fairly easy to get into. Like, it's not going to be a sub 2-second move that you can get it off, but if you position right, you should be able to find a lot of opportunities to get spiral slash out. So I think that would be a really, really cool change, and it should fix a lot of issues with the weapon. Sword mode is generally okay, in my opinion. The damage numbers, again, still need to be a bit lower. They want to keep sword mode for a little bit faster attacks, so you actually don't have that much movement speed, but you have more attack speed in sword mode. And if that's the case, then just double down on that. Make the attack speed of the sword mode attacks a little bit faster. So you could do a combination of increasing the attack speed in sword mode combined with increasing the motion value a little. And again, the file damage is generally okay. Like I said earlier, we'll have to kind of see how the file damage scales. I expect it'll be a lot of damage in the full release of the game, but if we can get a attack speed buff for sword mode, that'd be really cool. And then it maintain, again, I like that too because it maintains the identity of the weapon and it creates the duality between the axe mode and the sword mode. Lastly, the ultimate attacks, full release slash, just needs to do more damage. I don't know, add more file ticks on it. This DPS needs to be about 41. If you want to be bold, make it as high as dual blades at 51 DPS. That'd be really cool in my opinion. It's a really cool looking attack. It just doesn't do enough damage. So, and you know, Switch Axe is supposed to be a high damage weapon. So, you know, why not just make it as much damage as dual blades for that super ultimate attack? Anyway, those are my thoughts on how to fix Switch Axe. Thanks for watching.